Mike Costello, and I'm here with the Reverend Iris Freelander, and today we'd like to spend some time talking to you about the philosophy of New Thought. Our fellowship is a New Thought church, and metaphysical, New Thought, New Age, and a variety of other kinds of religious organizations and groups are so often misunderstood. And so we thought that it would be useful today to take a few minutes and share with you some basic ideas and concepts about New Thought. One of the places that we would like to begin is to talk to you about the concept of New Thought and the New Thought tradition and view of what God is and how we see God as a person or as a principle within the faith tradition that we share. And so, Iris, there are a variety of issues and beliefs that come into our thoughts when we talk about God in New Thought, but maybe we could just start by talking about what the general belief is about God.
Good. That's a wonderful subject to talk about. And New Thought is actually ancient wisdom in the spiritual aspect of New Thought. That would be ancient wisdom. And we all worship one God, and how we can have all the fuss about all the different people, I wouldn't know. But the Creator God who made us, there's an interesting aspect now of Creator God who made us, and then there are gods for each planet. And I think that's an interesting aspect.
Mm-hmm. And within this tradition of New Thought in the United States, probably what people can most often understand is religious organizations like Religious Science, Christian Science, Unity, where there is a metaphysical teaching or philosophy about the reality of God. And so where traditionalists so often see God as the Father or as a person, often people in our faith tradition and in our philosophy see God as a principle, yes, or as a power within the universe.
Yes. Well, you can't put God in a bottle. You can't bring him down to any size. And when they say man was created in the image of God, of course we believe that in spirit we were created in the image of God, and in physical form then that wouldn't be so, because you can't measure God. And actually in the Jewish faith, they don't even write out, they don't say God, they say G-D, because it's unthinkable to say the word, I believe. That's true. Is that your understanding?
Mm-hmm. And, well, the various concepts from religious traditions view God in a different way. At church recently, we were having a potluck dinner and someone was talking about inclusive language. And of course, New Thought has been in the forefront of inclusive language from its beginnings. And of course, New Thought as we know it today in our religious tradition came about as organized religion in the United States in the latter part of the last century. And Mary Baker Eddy, who was a pioneer of this way of thinking and the foundress of Christian Science, talked about the Father-Mother God, yes, concept. And today we have so much interest in inclusive language, but in New Thought it is customary to think of God in that dual reality of Father-Mother.
Yes, and for a long time, a lot of New Thought people were saying Father, Mother, God, and then it created some kind of negativity among the followers. So now I notice a lot of people are just saying Creator God, mm-hmm, and I think that's very interesting. It's like it goes in stages, mm-hmm, or phases, and so now, and it does have a different connotation. The woman's lib, I think, made it less desirable to say Father, Mother, God, because it sounds like you're a woman's liber if you say Father, Mother, God, which is not the spiritual aspect of saying it. And I know that's not the idea in our church when we say it. It's to be all, as you said, all inclusive, and it's not to be a woman's liber at all.
Mm-hmm. And that feminine aspect, the masculine and the feminine aspect, is really a way of reaching out to understanding God and the principle of the God presence as being inclusive, yes, as opposed to thinking of it in terms necessarily of being solely masculine.
Yes, and that's, if we remember that part, then we don't get hung up on semantics.
Yeah, and you know, words do build fences that, yes, keep us from coming together. Yeah. And so often we see that in New Thought, where our faith tradition and some of the words that we use and the approach that we have to worship and to prayer and to meditation and to philosophy and theology have a lot of misunderstanding on the part of traditionalists because they don't necessarily understand what New Thought actually does teach and what it is or is not.
Yes, and actually, as I said earlier, New Thought is actually ancient wisdom, and that's what we get our information from for New Thought, the basics of it. And so many people take the Bible literally, and I know that we don't, and you teach that class very well on the different interpretation than the Orthodox. But when they do that, it just locks it in so tightly that we don't move. There's no movement.
Mhm.
And if we don't have movement and fluidity, then we're stuck. And so often we get stuck. And so if we remember that New Age and New Thought is ancient wisdom, we have ever so much to draw from because there's so much there more than we can imagine that we can study and learn. And of course, meditation came out of the ancient wisdom context, and more and more people are meditating in this country today.
Yeah.
And yoga is becoming more and more used, and so many people use it, and it's just shocking and surprising that so many people who do yoga look so youthful, and that seems to be the main thing. So obviously the yoga opens your endocrine glands and your balances out the body, because people literally do stay more youthful looking if they do yoga.
Mhm. And that really leads us into the reality that New Thought, first of all, is nothing new,
Yes.
and is simply a title or a name that is put to a philosophy or religious group, and that New Thought, in many instances, does take Eastern and Western philosophy and theology and spirituality and blends them together. And then at different points in time, and depending upon different fellowships, churches, denominations, there is more or less of an emphasis either on Western tradition or on Eastern tradition. One of the things that we are a part of is the Metaphysical Church in America. And metaphysics, of course, traces its beginnings, as you said, to ancient wisdoms, and also to the real philosophy of metaphysics, which is in reality a branch of established philosophy, and that is the study of the source of life and the things that are beyond the physical life, which is what religion and spirituality are about anyway.
Yeah.
But from our perspective, we use and draw upon this rich tradition of mysticism and the marriage of the visible side of life, the physical life in which we find ourselves, and the reality of the invisible life or the spiritual life, and then taking the faith traditions of both the East and the West and putting them together and taking the best and the most positive from both sides.
Yes, and it makes the religion more usable and for daily use instead of just once a week or once every so often. And when another good thing about the New Age is we're blending mind, body, and spirit more fully instead of just thinking of the spiritual aspect, which somewhat becomes phony if we only put that context into our entire lives, because we do have body, mind, and spirit, so we can't just talk about one aspect of being, or we get hung up on the other things in a negative way. And so by blending the body, mind, and spirit aspect of being and paying attention to those other aspects of being, like the physical body, the New Age, New Thought people has brought the holistic way of life more fully to the forefront, which is so much more helpful and so much more helpful for our physical bodies. And I feel that, I've taught meditation now for 30 years, and I find that people really can't meditate, they can't get into their meditation if they're physically uncomfortable. And I did hospice work for 10 years too, and I learned, and through your work, you would know for sure with the hospitals that if people are uncomfortable in their physical body, they can't concentrate in their spiritual higher bodies because they're too locked into the physical aspect of being.
Mhm. And that connectiveness of mind, body, spirit does create for us a wholeness of life.
Yeah.
And in today's environment, we see a lot of people who are involved in this movement who don't have a strong religious or spiritual mentality,
Yeah.
yet the connectiveness of mind, body, spirit is there and available to them.
Yeah.
And so one of the fundamentals of New Thought and metaphysics is that it is inclusive, and that is that it doesn't create a dogma,
Yeah.
it doesn't create creed, and it doesn't tell people how to believe or what to believe, but it gives them a variety of mystical experiences and spiritual experiences and physical experiences and mental experiences,
Yes.
and allows each person to approach their philosophy and their life at any one of those levels or in all three of those levels combined.
Yes, or they can concentrate on the modality that they need at that moment and then later another modality so that they become a whole person in their entirety. And that's what life is all about. We're here to do just that and to coordinate the mind, body, and spirit aspect of being. And we wouldn't have a physical body if we didn't need to do that. And it's an interesting thing that that's how we're able to grow more fully here on earth than we do on the inner, because we have that physical body to work with and to work against. It's just like if children are not allowed to fight with their parents, to debate with their parents and to dialogue with their parents, that was the better choice of word, then they don't learn how to exist in the outer world. If the parent hasn't allowed them to dialogue at home, they don't know how to live then outside the home. And it's the same idea in what we're discussing in the mind, body, and spirit aspect of being.
Mhm. Fundamental to New Thought is positive thinking,
Yeah.
and a healthy mental attitude toward self and toward life and toward the divine reality of life. And then that connectiveness with health and healing is also a fundamental part of New Thought. And that's why so many New Thought people are involved in holistic health and alternative health systems. But that connectiveness of health and healing being an integral part of the religious experience, if one chooses to be religious or spiritual,
Yeah.
or allowing the ability of people to access this connectiveness between mind and body in the healing aspect and from the healing aspect, even without the religious aspect for those who aren't interested in that.
Yes, and it adds a fullness to life, to all of life, that is so important, and it makes us actually closer to God because we have a personal relationship instead of just the churchianity aspect of being, which I think is so wonderful, and that's part of, I think, the evolutionary process where this aspect of being is has come into all of society, and it's affected us in ways that are unexpected. It's just like the holistic way of life. It's brought that to the forefront to a very great extent. And people are more aware of their diet, are more aware of what to eat and not eat, the importance of exercise, and so forth. And the chakras, are located over the endocrine glands, the 7 major endocrine glands. So now chakra used to be, when I can remember as a child, no one ever talked about the chakras. No one knew what they are. Well, now almost everyone knows about the chakras and what they are. And I find that so exciting. It's such a wonderful time to be alive, to be on Earth. And I think we all contracted to be here at this time when so much is happening in the world, in our consciousness, because our consciousness is being raised. And if we don't allow our consciousness to be raised, it's because we're just staying so much in a rut that we won't even allow it, because it's around us all the time. And the energy is available, ever available. And it's so exciting. Isn't it exciting?
It is a tremendously exciting time. And as we look at and explore understanding New Thought and understanding metaphysics, it's important for people to understand that as a metaphysical organization or as a New Thought church, we do not involve ourselves in trying to convince people to believe, as I said earlier, what we believe. We instead try to create within them the ability to integrate this philosophy and this theology and this way of life into their life wherever they are. And because of that, so many people who come to us in our church and in our groups are what we call dual members. They may be active members of the Catholic Church or the Presbyterian Church, or they may be Hindu, or they may be Buddhist, or they may be in any religious movement or group, and yet they're able to come as they are with their religious beliefs and their spirituality intact and fellowship and share with us and we with them. And so they're able then to integrate this way of life, which is an inclusive philosophy and way of life as opposed to an exclusive. And we're so accustomed to religion and to spirituality being exclusive. That is, that we're a Presbyterian and then we're not a Catholic, or we're a Catholic and we're not a Hindu, or we're a Christian and we're not a Jew. And so we spend a lot of time in life defending what we are not and also defending what we are. And New Thought and metaphysics say, put that aside and let's grasp a hold of the common ground that we have, and that is that we are all divine, and that we all have a divine origin, and that we all have resident within us the power to communicate with, to be reconciled with, and to be one with that divine power. And then we are threefold persons, mind, body, and spirit. And so it doesn't matter where we come from or what we've been taught or where we're going, those realities are true for all of us. And then we're able to address that reality. And so we are talking about changing, trying to get people to change their church or their faith or their religion. And that's a very, very important aspect of New Thought and of metaphysics. And a great deal of that has to do with the fact that metaphysics and New Thought are fully integrated into the consciousness and the life of this country and of the West and of the East as well. And what that means is we see positive thinking taught in businesses and schools. We see it taught in conventional, traditional Christian churches. We see healing and the spiritual aspects of healing. We see the mind-body connection, mind-body-spirit connection being explored in medicine. And so it is a true integration of this philosophy. And so often people will label New Thought or metaphysics as a fringe group that is trying to change the way people think, when in fact metaphysics and New Thought are fully integrated into every aspect of life today.
And becoming more and more integrated just by attrition. And I think it's just because our consciousness is being raised. The consciousness of mankind is being raised. And regardless of what we do or don't do, then that consciousness raise is available for us. The acceleration is available for us. And most people are ready for it, and they're becoming more empowered. And that's what I heard you saying a moment ago. New Thought and New Age helps people to be self-empowered so they may have the freedom of choice and will use that freedom of choice. And they will explore one religion and another religion, and perhaps stay true to their basic religion into which they were born, but still be open enough to be all-inclusive in their thinking. And if they want their home base to be any specific church, then that's fine. But they're still exploring, and that's what's been happening. And it's just been happening in our time. More and more recently, it's been happening, and that's the exciting part.
And it's happening in our time because, as we know, the consciousness of this planet, the collective consciousness, that is the mind of all people on the planet, together with the mind of God, are moving toward a new age of enlightenment and understanding. And in that process, there is a shifting of the consciousness and the awareness. So many people talk about a shifting of the axis of the world, and certainly there are changes in the world that we know are taking place. But this change in universal consciousness and this openness to the realities of both East and West coming together, and the inclusiveness of the kinds of philosophies that we're talking about are just fundamental to the teaching that we believe so strongly in and we talk about so much.
Yes, and that's the Piscean age that we're going out of. We're in the Piscean age still, and we're going into the Aquarian. And that's very exciting that we're going into the Aquarian age, because during the age of Aries, which was 2,000 years ago, then it was like an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and everything was tough and rough and hard. And then the dispensation of love was brought in. Love you one another as I have loved you. And the love aspect was made more fully manifest throughout this prior 2,000 years. And now going into the age of Aquarius, that's very exciting, because we've come through those other stages, and now we're ready to look to the stars.
Right, and to integrate our physical being with our divine and spiritual being. And what we see happening, and certainly New Thought organizations believe it, is that the great message that Christ Jesus brought and the idea of the Christ consciousness and Christ awareness was introduced at the beginning of this age, and we're now coming to the end of the age. And what that means is that the practical, intellectual, and religious aspects of the Christ consciousness and Jesus' teachings will move from the mind into dynamic manifestation in life and in the outer realities of life. And because of that, we're going to see a shifting away from doctrine and away from creed and away from chapter and verse, if you will, as to what he said and what religion has brought us, into the practical aspects of living it out.
Yeah.
And so the next 2,000 years will be an extremely exciting time for religion and spirituality.
On an individual basis, and that's what New Thought and New Age has helped bring through, this individual basis, so that people don't think that I am a specific church, but I am as an individual, and that's it's the individuality that we're honoring and helping to bring forth in full flowering, and the self-empowerment is the important aspect.
And the global consciousness that's come in this process, because a great part of what we're talking about is the understanding of East and West, bringing the mysticism and the spirituality of the East to be a part of the spirituality and the religion of the West. And that's only possible when we come to understand and love one another and accept one another unconditionally. And that's certainly happening now.
Yes,
and 100 years ago, it wasn't as prevalent because information wasn't the same, travel wasn't the same, and understanding wasn't the same.
And doctrine wasn't the same.
And doctrine wasn't the same. And today we have a different view, a totally different view that is taking place in the world of religion, in the world of politics, in the physical and in the spiritual, and it is transcending so much of what we believed to be true and is bringing us into a wonderful, wonderful time of tolerance and understanding and unity.
Yes. And it was inevitable that happened. And it's unfortunate, it might sound like heresy to say it, but it's unfortunate that the churches kept such a tight rein on, quote, religion, so that individuals didn't have the opportunity to exercise any self-responsibility. They didn't have the opportunity to grow because they were too stifled and stilted. And now more people are just accepting that they are, just what we've been saying, that they're taking on the self-responsibility, they're learning there's more to life than just the aspect of being that they've learned in the churches. And I'm not against churches, but I think the churches have fallen down for that reason. And there was an article in the Press Telegram just recently, I don't know if you read it, but it was saying how many churches there are, large churches in Long Beach that have closed their doors just fairly recently, but they've gradually been closing. And I think that's why, because they're not giving the church that doesn't allow the people freedom to be themselves and to think for themselves and to just be, then they are falling down. And that's happened in England, and I don't know about other countries, but I know it's happened in England to a very great extent. But yet people are not becoming less spiritually oriented, it's just spiritually oriented in a different way. And I think it's because the churches kept too tight a grasp on lives, human lives, over the centuries. And now the people are awakening and they're seeing there's more to life than just to be made feel guilty or to have other negativity brought into their way of being.
Mm-hmm. And the doctrines are being broken down, so to speak, so that there is a forced tolerance among people. And as a consequence, the autocratic organizations and groups that were very single-focused are losing people, but they're really losing people because of the fact that people are evolving, and people's consciousness is evolving, and so those organizations no longer serve the purpose that they served in the past.
And to me, and I'm sure to you, the Christ consciousness that the Lord Christ took on when he assumed the role of Christhood for our planet was always there, but it got changed by the dogma that was left after he left this earth. It was changed through the churchianity. And he was Lord of all religions of the world. And there was always a Christ for every planet. There's a Christ for our planet. And before Jesus, who of our evolutionary life way was capable of being the Christ, then the Christ energy was manifested through Krishna, the Lord Buddha, and other, Zoroaster, and others. And so now it's just come into its own. It's taken 2,000 years for the real truth of it, I believe, to manifest.
Mm-hmm. And for Christianity, in a traditional sense, to be able to accept itself as an inclusive faith, tolerant and a part of all other faiths.
Yes.
And that is a cataclysmic change in philosophy.
It seemed that human consciousness had to be able to raise to the point that they could function from their own beinghood instead of just from the church itself. And now we've reached that point by coming into the energy of the age of Aquarius. And so it's all falling into place very quickly on that basis instead of over the years. And probably there was a very good reason for that, because it helped our mankind as a whole to grow in the way we were supposed to grow by having our evolutionary journey be guided in the way it was through the various churches. So it was no accident, and it was not wrong. It was not bad. It's not saying somebody say, "Oh, wasn't that awful?" It's like it's wonderful that we're coming into a new energy, not that it's so awful that we were in the other energy, because we grew out of that.
Yeah, and that energy was needed at that point in time.
Yes.
And every church is right for the people who are drawn to it and get from it what they need on their pilgrimage and journey. And all of us are moving from place to place, as Dr. Garlish, the founder of our organization, used to say, in unceasing progression towards God. And so if we're moving in unceasing progression, then at every point in our life, and in my life and in your life and in everyone's life, the church that they're in, the group that they're with, the life that they have, the circumstances that they find themselves in are exactly where they need to be along the way. And then in the process, we move from group to group and from life to life and understanding to understanding. And ultimately, we move from this physical life into a spiritual reality and dimension that transcends it.
And on that basis, we accept all people and all churches and all creeds and all dogmas as valid.
Very important and a cornerstone of New Thought, that we do understand and accept everyone. Very, very important ideas and concepts. And so often people misunderstand what we have to say.
They misunderstand us because it doesn't fit in their frame of reference, because the frame of reference is the old way, not the new way.
Exactly. And during the last few minutes, Reverend Freelander and I have been sharing with you some ideas about New Thought, philosophy, and metaphysics, and we hope you found this information useful. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within.